Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to give everyone just another 30 seconds or so to get logged on and settled, and then we'll get started. All right. Looks like we have just about everyone. So let's dive in. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our webinar on AI-powered drafting. To start, just a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded, so we'll share that with everyone who registered in case you need to drop off early for another call, you want to review it again, have some colleagues you want to share it with. Additionally, we welcome your questions. We're going to leave plenty of time for those, and you can submit them through the Q&A box, which is in the toolbar at the bottom of your webinar window. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jeff O'Neill. He's PatentBot's founder and CEO, and he's going to walk us through how to draft a full patent application with AI tools, starting from an invention disclosure. Jeff?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for the nice intro. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get started. Um, the title of today's webinar, AI-powered drafting from invention disclosure to full application. And before we dive in, I just want to give the big picture of where this fits in terms of everything that PatentBots does. So PatentBots has four different products. Our most popular one is Prep and Pros Pro. The others are Art Unit Predictor, PatentPlex, and Examiner Statistics. And within Prep and Pros Pro, there's four parts you can see. One part is drafting automation. We have our well-known proofreading tools, and then we have Office Action Explorer and Office Action Admin to help you with stuff relating to Office Action responses. And what we're doing today is just actually one part of our drafting automation tool. So we're really covering just a tiny bit of PatentBot's overall functionality, but this is new and exciting functionality, and we're looking forward to sharing it with you. And what I'm showing now is basically a roadmap of what we're going to cover today. So we are drafting a patent application with PatentBot's Gen AI, and I tried to create this diagram to kind of illustrate how it's going to work. So on the left here, we're starting with an invention disclosure document, and that's going to be submitted into PatentBot's generative AI tool. And then below, we have the order that I'm going to draft the patent application in. And I think this is a fairly typical order. So what we're going to do first is have Gen AI draft claims. And then, of course, the human's going to review it. And then we're going to go back and we're going to ask the Gen AI to help us come up with a description of the figures that we want to generate for this patent application. So we're going to generate text that describes the figures that we want. And then you can do the figures manually, or you could use other Gen AI to convert the text into actual PowerPoint Visio figures. And we're going to show you briefly how this works with Claude. And then we're going to have actual figures that we can use, and we're going to submit those figures into PatentBot's generative AI. And then we're going to go through and generate the detailed description of a patent application. And then we're going to generate the other parts like the summary, the brief description of the figures, abstract title, and so forth. And we're going to end up with a complete patent application. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And here we have a Word document of just a placeholder text for a patent application. So there's really nothing here yet. And I've opened the PatentBot's drafting automation tools, which show up right inside of Word, right next to your Word document. So very easy to use. And in the drafting tools we have on the right, we're going to focus on the last three tabs here. The first one we've had for quite some time. We call it the rules-based generation. So this is a nice way to generate sections of your patent without any Gen AI at all. And sometimes that is better, as we'll explain as we keep going. The next part, we have saved prompts that you can reuse over and over again for, consistent, style and practice when you're drafting across your firm. So there's prompts that we provide, there's prompts that your law firm can create for all its users, and then individuals can create their own Gen AI prompts that you can just go ahead and reuse with a single click. And then the last tab is our generative AI chat, where we have a chat window to do whatever you want with Gen AI for drafting your patent. And the way it works is you just click the start button. And what we do is we review where you're at and we suggest what we might want to do next. So here it's pretty easy. The application is essentially empty. We haven't done anything yet. And it's suggesting, well, let's start by drafting an independent claim. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But to do that, we want to add our invention disclosure um, to the discussion here. And the way you do that is up at the top, we make it easy to add documents. And there's several kinds of documents you can add. You can add an invention disclosure. You can add figures that you've created to go along with your patent application. You could add a related patent application, like maybe another application for the same client, maybe it's a parent, and that makes it easier to pull information from that other patent application. You could submit prior art to help you when you're drafting your claims. And then we have a catch-all other where you can attach any document that you want that you think is going to be useful, and you provide a description of that other document so that the generative AI has a better understanding of why that document is provided. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and attach my invention disclosure document and select the invention disclosure type. And I'm clicking Add. And you can see that it's now been attached to this session. So here is the invention disclosure document that we just added. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. This is the invention disclosure document. I think it's fairly typical of what a lot of you see. And this is a really good invention disclosure. We got 4 pages of details about the invention. And when we attach the invention disclosure, we make it easy to see what we've extracted from it. So this is the text that we extracted from the invention disclosure document, and this text is available when we're using our generation tools. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started with drafting. And the first thing I'm going to do is exactly what's being suggested here. I want to draft an independent claim. And when I send this prompt, what we're doing is we're sending the current draft of the patent application, and there's really nothing there yet, but we're sending it anyway. And we're sending the contents of the invention disclosure document, and we're sending this prompt. And this information is being sent to Claude, and we're using that information to allow Claude to provide a good answer for us. And here we go. This is, a draft of a first independent claim. So of course, you want to review this in detail. Some people would even argue that you shouldn't use Gen AI to draft the first independent claim and you should do it yourself because, you might be biased by whatever Claude does. But we're going to start with Claude's independent claim here. So I'm going to review this and I want to update it to make it a little broader. So in particular, there's this concept of quality criteria in the claim. And I want to remove the quality criteria apart from claim one and save that for dependent claims to be drafted later, because it's a detail that I think, is not important for an independent claim. So we're sending that to Claude. So Claude has the claim it just drafted. It still has the invention disclosure, and it's going to update the claims according to what I asked it to do. So now we have a new claim one that's a little bit shorter because it removed the part that we didn't want to be there. So let's keep going. And in the interest of just moving along, I'm going to go straight to drafting a full claim set. In some instances, you might want to do dependent claims and then a second independent claim and so forth. But I'm just going to say to Claude, okay, I like this claim. Give me a full set of 3 and 20 claims. And I'm going to give a little more detail. I'm going to say, have the dependent claims all be different from each other for greater protection. So that's what I personally used to do when I drafted claims manually, is I didn't want to repeat dependent claims. I wanted them all to be different. And it's kind of easy to, have your dependent claims be the same across claim sets because you just copy and paste, change the claim type, right? It's efficient. But since it's being done automatically, we might as well have all the dependent claims be a little different from each other. All right, so now we have a full set of 3 independent and 20 total claims. And we make it very easy to insert these into your Word document. The way it works is you put the cursor where you want the text to be, and we have this little button here. And actually, let me back up and explain a little bit. I forgot to explain this. So when you ask a question, there are 3 parts to the response. There's sort of a summary explaining what it just did. So it's saying, hey, I just created these claims for you. We got some more details here. And then the text with this vertical bar is text that is meant to be inserted into your patent application. So this is the claim text that we asked it to generate. And then at the bottom, we always provide suggestions of what to do next. And we intentionally keep it really brief. So here it's suggesting, to work on the figures. So let me insert the claim text in here. So now I've inserted the 20 claims that we just drafted into the Word document. And now we can start working on the suggestions of what comes next.
And Jeff, before you do that, we've gotten a
Mhm.
few questions about this section.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first one kind of goes back to where you were attaching the invention disclosure and giving the model some inputs to work with.
Mhm.
And the question is, how would it handle the inputs if clients are using their own AI tools to provide what might be actually an overabundance of information?
So I think it should be okay. I mean, if it's 100 pages, then maybe we want to cut it down. But I think overabundance is often not a problem. You could just attach it. In large input documents are okay. It doesn't really slow things down. And unless there's something harmful in there or distracting, it's probably okay to leave it in. If you do want to condense it and make it shorter, it's probably better to do that outside of our tools and just use Claude or OpenAI directly. And then you can extract the stuff that you don't need, or maybe manually extract it and then attach it here.
Great. Thank you. And then we've gotten a question about how the models are analyzing the invention disclosure form, and specifically, how is it finding the point of novelty before writing that independent claim?
Yep. So, I mean, ideally, the invention disclosure has some suggestions of what is important um, to guide the generative AI. Um, if the invention disclosure does not have suggestions of what is important, I mean, Claude's probably pretty good at figuring it out, but I would suggest that you, as the patent attorney, would, review the invention disclosure or ask Claude to suggest what it thinks the main points of novelty are. And then you, as the patent attorney, pick what you think is the point of novelty. And when you are, doing this prompt to draft an independent claim, you should add there, the point of novelty is X to guide Claude to make sure that it focuses in that point of novelty. So there's definitely, so we're not suggesting that Claude is replacing you, which of course none of us want. It's to help you and Claude work together to do the best work most efficiently. And having you identify the point of novelty, it's not a huge amount of work for you, and it re is really helpful to focus Claude to do the right thing.
Great. And of course, we've gotten questions about privacy and security.
Mhm.
So, can you share a little bit more about how Claude is getting the invention disclosure? How's that kept confidential?
Yeah. So we go to the extreme for your protection, and everything that gets sent to Claude is never stored on any computer except your own. So every time you send a prompt to Claude, like draft an independent claim, we're sending the contents of your Word document, we're sending the invention disclosure, we're sending the prompt, we're getting the result back. But all of this is just passed in transit. and it never gets stored to any disk. So by the time you see the results, all the servers that are involved no longer have any record of anything that happened. And sometimes people call this zero data retention, and that means none of the data ever hits a disk anywhere. And in particular, like we've attached the invention disclosure here, so it is stored, but it's only stored on your computer. It's basically attached inside of Microsoft Word, and every time you send a prompt, we're sending the invention disclosure up, and it's never stored on our server or any other server.
Great, thank you. I know that's top of mind for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'll do one more question. We've still got lots, but I know we want to keep moving through the
Mhm.
process. But one more, because this is kind of, Gen AI by default and the way you work with it is iterative, and you've talked about the reviewing along the way. We've got a question of asking how different are the claims if you're running the same thing, and using the same invention disclosure multiple times? They even noted this example we're working with has probably been done a couple of times for demo purposes. So how different is the outputs, I think is the question.
Yes, so with generative AI, there's a parameter they call it, I think it's called temperature. And it you can adjust it for best outputs versus variability. And we set that parameter all the way to the right to be best output because we think, why not have the best output? Um, and as a result, every time you use Claude, you should be getting similar results. I mean, there's always a little bit of differences, like, tiny differences in the input are going to give you differences in the output. But we think, having the best output is more important than getting different results every time that you do it. And if you want to try different things, well, you can ask Claude to do that. You can say, draft 5 completely different independent claims to cover this invention, and it's going to give you 5 different claims, and then you as the patent attorney can review them all and decide which one you like best, and go ahead and proceed with that.
Thank you. These are great questions. Please keep them coming. We'll pause again to take some more in a moment.
Okay. Yeah, and thanks for bringing those questions up. Those were all great. All right, so to get back where we are in the drafting process, we now have 20 claims, but nothing else. So we need to keep going. So the next thing we want to do is generate figures, and we help you do that. And the way that we do that is you can say to Claude, propose a suggested figure sequence to illustrate the invention. So I'm going to send this to Claude. And Claude is now processing our claims that we have, and it's processing the invention disclosure document that we've attached. And it's reviewing all of this information to come up with a set of patent figures that thinks will be what we need to explain the invention. So Claude suggested 7 figures, and these will be familiar to you: system architecture, a method flowchart, a phoneme graph is specific to this invention. Um, it does a user interface, which is really nice. All these figures that are kind of specific to the invention. And it's even providing notes of where they're helpful. So this is for the independent claims. This supports claim 2. This supports claim 3 and 4, and so forth. So this is kind of our large plan for the figures that we need for this patent application. And if you want, you can adjust this. You can say, I don't think we need this quality assessment flow. Let's get rid of that and replace it with another flow chart for something else. And then we'll give you a new set of figures. And once you like this high level, description of what the figures should be, you can ask it to provide a more in-depth description of what should be in the figure. And it's a really simple prompt. You just say to Claude, provide details for figure 1. So now what it's going to do, it's going to again look at the invention disclosure, look at the claims, and it's going to suggest the elements that should be shown in figure 1. It's going to suggest the reference numbers that go along with it, and it's also going to suggest the relationships between the elements. So these are the things that it thinks should be illustrated in the figure, and these are the relationships between them. Um, so from this description, we now need to generate the actual, PowerPoint figure or say Visio figure. And we don't do that yet. And honestly, there's other Gen AI tools that do that really well. And actually, just recently, I tried Claude Design, which is able to, generate graphics. And it's a little rough, as you can see here. But what I did is I took this description that you see here of the figure, and I input that into Claude Design on the left here, and I said, create a PowerPoint slide for this figure. And it's clearly not a work of art. It needs human interaction to fix it, but it does save you a ton of time in creating all these boxes, adding the text, adding the numbers. So all the basic elements are here, and now you just need to, move things around, move the arrows, and you hopefully have a pretty good figure for your figure one. And then you can go ahead and repeat that process for the other figures. So you can ask Claude to provide details for figure two, then use Claude Design and so forth. And you keep going through all that. And then you'll have a full set of PowerPoint or Visio figures that you can then use for further drafting. And the Claude design here is kind of a new product, and you can see that it needs some work. But because it is a new product, I'm hopeful that tools like Claude Design will just get better and better at providing better first drafts of figures for us to use as patent attorneys. So let's pretend that we have drafted a full set of figures, either on our own or using Claude. And these are figures that we might have. Um, so this is a complete set of PDF figures that we're going to use for the next parts of drafting this patent application. And the way that we can use these figures is we can attach them in the same way that we attach the invention disclosure. So I'm going to select Add Document again. I'm going to select our PDF file with all of our drawings, and I'm indicating that these are figures. And now we are adding them as an attachment to be used as further context in our drafting. And this takes a little longer because we're doing something really cool. We are asking Claude to provide a text description of every single figure, right? So this is just like an image of a system diagram. And we're saying, Claude, hey, describe this image in text so that we can use it for drafting the patent application. So Claude has done this, and we can open up that description and we can look at it side by side with the actual figure. So here is Claude's description of figure one. It's a high-level system architecture diagram. And sure enough, that's what figure one is. It's listing all of the elements in the figure along with their reference number. And it's also describing the relationship. So it's describing the arrows between the elements and so forth. And then for figure two, Claude is saying, okay, this is a diagram of a user interface, and it's describing all the details of what's in this figure. Figure three is a flow chart. It's describing the steps. And it's even able to, understand that we have this branching step here, where in some instances it's going to go back, in some instances it's going to keep going, and so forth and so forth. We have a detailed text description of every figure. And the nice thing is that this is wonderful context to help us as we continue drafting the further parts of the patent. So, and Heather, let me know if there's any questions on the figures before I keep going.
Not on the figure specifically, but a couple questions kind of on this theme of
Yeah.
um, it's kind of what a little more depth about, how the inputs that are being typed by the patent attorney, how they're being augmented by patent bots in terms of what's being sent to Claude to do the processing.
Yeah. So it's honestly fairly, well, I guess there's some complexity I haven't talked about. Um, So I forgot to mention this when I was looking at this slide, but the patent bots Gen AI We're using Claude today, and we recommend that you all use Claude because it works really well. But the other part of it is we created our own patent application drafting skill. And I think most people are familiar with what skills are, but it's basically an instruction manual for how to draft patent applications well. And what happens behind the scenes is when you submit a prompt, um, we are always including the entire contents of your patent application. We're always including the entire contents of your invention disclosure and your drawings because we think these things are so important. Every single question should have access to these things. And the other thing that we're adding is we're adding the most relevant parts of our skill for the specific drafting task that we're asking Claude to do. So, for example, when we're asking Claude to provide a detailed description of a figure, like we have here, then we have the part of our skill that, instructs Claude how to do this well, and we're adding that into the prompt. Um, so by selecting the most relevant parts of the skill, Claude is getting detailed information to draft things in the way that they need to be done that are most relevant to your question. And I guess the other thing it always has access to is we always give it the entire history of the conversation. So that way, it makes it easy to refer back to things that have happened before. So you can say, like, revise claim one to remove something, and it knows exactly what that previous claim one was. You don't have to retell it what it is.
And we do now have some questions about the figures specifically.
Mhm.
Um, if Claude's description of the drawings is incorrect, is there a way to edit it before proceeding?
Yeah. So that's actually very easy to do. So we give you the text description that Claude created, and you can copy and paste this into another document. You can then modify it however you want. And then your modified description, you just add it here. And you select your file. And for this, I would use the other box, and I would say like my description of figures. Um, and then you attach it, and we can use it in exactly the same way that the automated description is used. We're just instead using your description.
Great. And then related to figures too, we've got a couple questions of how, what types of figures that it can analyze best. Like, will it work for life sciences? Will it work for mechanical? That kind of thing.
Yep. So the most of what we're doing is technology independent. So in particular, I think with understanding figures, um, yeah, it's going to, nothing is specific to any technology area, so it should do a good job. Especially if you have the invention disclosure as well, that will help Claude understand the figures. So if you attach a strong invention disclosure in combination with any drawings that you attached, it's just going to do a really great job in understanding exactly what's present. And I think that's part of what happened here. Like, yeah, figure two is our user interface screen. And I think if you look at the figure, that might not be obvious, but because our invention disclosure talked about that, it was able to understand that better.
Great. All right. I think that's good for now. But again, everyone, please keep the questions coming. These are great.
Okay. So we've attached the drawings, we have the description. So let's go to the next step. So I'm going to say to Claude, I have completed the figures. What next? And it's going to come up with its suggestion of the next part of the patent application that it thinks we should draft. So not surprisingly, it says the next step is to draft the detailed description, and it's suggesting we do the figures in order, no big surprise. So I'm going to do something a little different now. So I'm going to start drafting the detailed description, but I'm going to jump over to our saved prompts section where we have a bunch of reusable prompts. And these are very specific things that you're going to want to use over and over again in all your drafting. So I created a prompt for what I call the detailed description introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and put the cursor where I want that to be. and I'm going to click the play button, and I'm sending this prompt to Claude to draft the first few paragraphs of the detailed description in exactly the way that I like to do it in all of my patent applications. And when it comes up and I insert the text inside, I'm going to show you the text of the prompt so you can see what it is that I drafted. So here we go. So, so it's basically providing an introduction to the invention. And if we look at the prompt, we have this little eyeball icon so you can see what all the prompts are. It's very simple. It says, write about 5 paragraphs at the very beginning of the detailed description section. These should provide a gentle introduction to the subject matter of the invention. They should also convey the main novel ideas to help the patent examiner understand the technical contribution and appreciate the importance of the invention. So the idea here is we're just trying to, introduce the patent examiner to understand why this is an important and exciting invention that he should allow. So this is the introduction that we drafted.
And Jeff, you just showed the text there. We've got a question that's perfectly tied to that of can those be modified, particularly if you have a unique style or there's a client preference?
Yes, yep, and that's exactly why we have this prompts tab. So the left side of this prompts tabs are example prompts that we have created, not only because they're useful, but they provide you guidance for how to create your own prompts. And the other parts here are for your own prompts. So in the middle, these are what we call organization prompts. So these are prompts that your law firm can create, and everybody in your law firm will have access to them. So it could be, client Amazon likes to do abstracts in this way. So you could have an Amazon abstract prompt. And everyone in your law firm will have that prompt, and everyone will use that same exact prompt for generate an abstract for an Amazon patent application. And then on top of that, you can create your own prompts to match your own drafting style. If you like to draft certain sections in a specific way, you can create your own prompt that will only be available to you and not be available to anyone else at your law firm. All right, so with the introduction, let's get started with drafting the meat of the patent application. And I'm just going to do the descriptions of the figures in order. So here I'm saying draft a complete description of figure 1. Make sure to provide needed support for dependent claims and alternative implementations in the invention disclosure. So now we're sending that off to Claude. Claude has the invention disclosure, it has the description of the drawings, it has the claims, it has the intro that were just done. And it's going to go ahead and draft a description of this system diagram that I showed you before. And when it comes up, we can compare what Claude wrote to the actual figure to get an idea of, how well it's doing. And we're doing this all, in real time as if, the same way that you're going to use it. So we do have to wait a little bit for Claude to give us its answer. All right, so this is a description of figure 1, and it looks pretty good. And I'm gonna put the cursor where I want it to be. I'll click this insert button, and this is the figure 1 description that it just added. And it's about 12, 13 paragraphs here. So that's a nice detailed description of figure 1. And let's put figure 1 next to it and take a peek at what's here. So figure 1 is the system architecture. We got the ref numbers. Let me make sure so you can see this a little better. It's got the central processing component, environment, blah, blah, blah. Um, so we have the server, and it's referencing other figures to come later. It's got the voice bank, so forth. So it's describing all the components, and it's also describing the relationships between the components. And it's quite interesting that because it has a description of all the figures, it is referencing figures that we haven't done yet. So it's mentioning figure 5 and it's talking things that are going to be in figure 5 because we already have what's going to be in figure five in the description of our drawings, even though we haven't drafted figure five yet. So so let's pretend that we've reviewed this all in detail and we want to keep going. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go ahead and draft figure two. So, so I'm going to give a similar prompt for figure two and send that along. And while that's going, are there any other questions that are coming up?
We do. We have a couple that are sort of related to kind of quality and using a model specific like this versus using Claude kind of off the shelf. And one is, why is using something like this better than off the shelf? And the other sort of related, and I think you can answer them both, is that they've heard that a flaw of using off the shelf is that training might include a lot of garbage patterns. So if you get garbage in, you get garbage out. So how are our systems kind of set up to ensure that you're not getting subpar outputs?
Yeah, so I guess I'll address kind of the garbage in, garbage out part first. So, we're using a regular Claude model. We're not doing any kind of updating of it other than providing our own skill. And I guess in my experience, I'm not seeing the garbage in, garbage out problem. It's not always going to be exactly what you need, but I think Claude is providing a very good starting point for you to keep going. Um, and I guess the other part is, what value are we providing on top of Claude? And, you know, I think the main value of using us on top of Claude is that we make it easy to attach the things that you need to give Claude to help you draft. So one example is every time you send a prompt to Claude, we are giving Claude the current draft of the patent application. We're grabbing it right from your Word document and we're sending it with your prompt. We make it easy to attach drawings. We make it easy to attach the invention disclosure. So we're helping give Claude the information that it needs to provide you with a quality response. And then the other value add is that we give Claude our own patent drafting skill that helps guide Claude to generate higher quality outputs. And I suppose that does address the garbage out to some extent, in that with the patent drafting skill that we created, Claude has better information to draft things in the way that patent attorneys expect.
And then
Let me
similar,
let me keep going just to keep
okay.
Claude going, and then I'll come back to your question.
Yeah.
So here we drafted figure two, and I'll go ahead and insert that into the patent application, and we can take a quick peek at figure two and compare it to our figures. So it says figure two is a user interface screen, and sure enough, that is what figure two is. And we have a lot of details of all of the things that are shown in figure two. So with that, let's start figure three. So I'm going to say, oops, draft a complete description of figure three, and we'll send that along. All right, so let's go back to questions.
Yeah, we got a question about, as you're moving through the chat, is there a record of it, of what all was prompted and asked and the responses that were provided?
So we have the record here of all the prompts that you provided and all the answers that came back. Um, we actually don't have a way to export that, but if that's something people think is valuable, we can add that. That would be fairly easy. Um, we have this little button up here which resets your conversation to the beginning. Like if you made a mistake and you want to start over again, but it would be easy to add some kind of export button here to do that. And that's a good idea. I think we'll add that to our list of things to do.
And then just one additional question. A couple of people have asked, specifically what model we're on, and are there sort of the backups in place depending on, the level of effort that's needed from it and that kind of thing.
Yep. So we're currently using the Claude Sonnet model. We're not using the Fable one. And we think it works quite well. And, we think there's a balance of, the latest and greatest model versus, what is good enough. And part of it, is cost. We're not charging our customers any token prices. It's all included in your subscription. Um, and we basically regularly monitor the models that are available and, upgrade when we think it makes sense to do so. So currently it's Claude Sonnet. Llama is also available, but we recommend Sonnet because it's working a lot better than Llama.
And then we got asked a question, and this we'll pause after this and let you get back to it as well. Of it seems like you could prompt to do a larger portion of a figure at a time, or yeah, to handle a portion of a figure at a time rather than the whole figure. But the question is, does doing it in smaller chunks sort of help improve what you're getting in terms of the quality?
Um, So I think smaller chunks is good for earlier back and forth between the patent attorney and Claude. If you tell it to describe, just a part of a figure, you can then provide feedback to Claude for anything that you don't like. If there's terminology that you think is wrong, for example, or it's not focusing on the exact right thing, you can provide that feedback earlier and then ask Claude to continue with the generation of the description of that figure. So I think it is a quality improvement, but I think um, the main reason is the earlier, faster feedback to give Claude more guardrails about doing the right thing.
And I think we have a comment that would support maybe being able to access the chat and prompts history later, because we've gotten a question about if you do want to switch tasks in the middle of the chat and come back, like how would that work to pick back up where you left off if you were here?
Yeah, so if you close your Word document, you're going to lose all the history because we don't save anything anywhere. So I guess the idea is you could export kind of the history and then you can come back the next day, reopen Word and import the history. So that's an interesting idea. It's not something I had considered yet, but we'll definitely add that to the roadmap.
Yep, so great
Uh,
feedback. Thank you, everyone.
yeah, so figure three is done. So I'll go ahead and insert figure three, and we'll take a peek at figure three. So figure three is this flow chart, and we have figure three describing, each step of the flow chart, including go down to 380 where we have this branching mechanism. And yeah, it says at 380, it says in some instances it's going to loop back to step 350, other time, and so forth. So it correctly gave that description. So I'm going to start figure four, get that going. And yeah, let's go back to questions.
Sorry, I was responding to one in the chat. Let me go, give me just a moment to finish that, and then I'll share with
Okay.
everyone what
Yeah.
we.
And the next figure is another flow chart. It's a short one, so it should be a faster one to do.
Someone wanted to know, just for the sake of clarity, if the figures that you're working from were generated by AI or were they given to you by the, client in this case?
They were created by me probably 15 years ago. So these are human generated figures. Um, yeah, I haven't used Claude generated figures yet. All right, so figure four is done. So I'll go ahead and insert figure four into the draft. And we can take a peek at, so figure four is another flow chart, and we can compare it to the actual figure. And, we have a nice description of these steps. And let's get figure five started. So figure five is a little different. This is a typical figure that I have in my patent applications because, my technology area is like, double E computer science. So I often have server diagrams like this. And the description of these figures is tends to be briefer because you're mostly referring back to things that you've already described. So I have a slightly different prompt that I want to use here. So I'll go ahead and paste it in. So I'm saying draft a brief description of figure 5, and I'm explaining this mostly references things already described so we can keep it brief. We don't have to repeat everything we've already said just to keep this section a bit shorter. All right, so here is the description of figure 5. Go ahead and insert that in. And we can compare it. So figure 5 is a block diagram illustrating a server, and it's describing all of these components that are in the server, and it's fairly repetitive of things we've already described. So it's a pretty short section. And then we have one more figure to do, and let's go ahead and kick that off. So we're going to draft, and here we're going back to a more complete description of figure 6. And figure 6 is a fairly technical figure. Um, these are directed graphs that relate to the nitty-gritty of how the invention works. Um, and there's two parts to it. It's going to go ahead and describe those two parts. Else. All right, so here is our description of figure 6. We're going to go ahead and insert that into the Word document. And let's take a peek. So figure 6 illustrates two related lattice diagrams used during forced alignment, blah, blah, blah. So this is describing what is going on here. All right, so we've now described every single one of our figures. So we're pretty close to having a complete draft of the patent application. But let's pretend that I reviewed this and there's some disclosure that I want more of. So I'm going to ask Claude to provide more description. And I'm saying to Claude, I want additional description of phonemes in context. Where should I put that? So it's going to review the entire patent application and suggest the best location to put this kind of additional description. So you can also use this Q&A session to, update things that you've already written. You can ask it to review things that you've already written, find good locations to provide more details and things like that. All right, so it's gone through and it's saying the best place for this is the end of figure 6. All right, great. So that's basically where we're at now. And it's telling us suggestions of what this description should look like. So I'm going to say, let's do it. And I'm writing, this is an important, this is important background, so draft this in detail. And we're going to go ahead and ask Claude to provide this additional technical background because, this technical background might be helpful in the future. If we ever need to amend our claims or add dependent claims, and we need some more technical specifics, we want to make sure that they are included in the detailed description.
Jeff, well, it's thinking about that when you got time for a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about the style earlier, and particularly using those, when you set your own saved prompts or the company, your firm has them for you as well. Someone's asking a question, is as part of those, can you input some examples of your writing or drafting so that it can mirror or replicate that style?
Yep, you sure can. So in the prompts here, I'll just pretend to be creating a prompt. So the way you create a prompt is you provide a name, something that's meaningful to you, and then you can put whatever text you want here. And you can use examples, but I guess I find it most effective to write text that kind of describes a template. And actually a good example of that is probably this description of a computing device. So this is a pretty detailed prompt that matches my style. And basically, I'm saying I want to illustrate a computing device. And the first part of the prompt, I'm saying use the next available figure number. So if we have five figures, use figure six, or use figure one if there's not any figures yet. And then I'm explaining that for the reference numbers, the reference numbers should match the figure number. So if we're in figure three, all the figure numbers should be like in the 300s. And then I'm giving a template. So I'm saying the first paragraph should be this, what we have here, but adjusted for the selected figure number. So I basically copy and paste this paragraph in all my applications, and I used to manually update the figure number and the reference numbers, and it's basically doing that for me. So this is like a template. And this is the second paragraph. And again, this is a template that I always use, and it's going to automatically update the figure number and reference numbers for whatever figure we currently have. And then there's instructions for what to do next. So this is kind of a mix of like a template and an example of things that I've done before. And Claude is very good at following these kinds of instructions to basically mirror the kinds of things that you've done before.
And then just one quick note, a couple of folks are asking, for the sake of time here, obviously you're inserting the text and we're moving on to the next section, but in practice, you would really be reviewing and editing in the Word side of the panel. So just to reiterate, each time you then resubmit something, it's getting that latest and greatest Word
Exactly.
text. So
Yep.
just wanted to clarify that. We've gotten a couple questions about
Yep.
that.
Yep. So when you hit the send button, the first thing we do is we grab the current text of the Word document. So we're getting the latest version. Cool. So I asked it to provide, more details on this technical subject matter. So let's go ahead and insert it. And I want to quickly finish the patent application. So maybe we can hold off questions until the end. Um, all right. So what is it saying we should do next? So it's saying that, oh, we need to do the claim summary. And it's even suggesting that we use the patent bot's rules-based claim summary generator. So this is where the claim summary goes. I'm going to our rules-based generation tab, and I'm now generating a claim summary. So we're copying and pasting the claims, but we're making it look like the claim summary section. So you have the literal support of your claims for your patent application. Um, and this is done without any generative AI. That's why we call it the rules-based generation. And the idea here is you don't have to worry about Gen AI doing anything weird. You have 100% guarantee that you're getting what you expect to get here. All right, so let's go ahead and finish. So we did the claim summary. Afterwards, we need to do title, background, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go finish these off. And I'm going to use the saved prompts for this. So let's go ahead and generate a title. So I'm using our saved prompt for the title to go ahead and insert that. There we go. There's the title. I'm next using our saved prompt for the background section. So we're adding that in. So the saved prompt for the background, it instructs Claude to write about 5 paragraphs, to understand the higher level subject matter of the invention and to suggest, previous approaches of what people have tried for this invention, kind of typical for a background section. All right, so there's our background section. And we have the claim summary. And now we got to do the brief description of the figures. So I'm going to use our saved prompt to do the brief description of the figure section. There we go. And I think, oh, we have one more. We have to do the abstract. So let's go down to the bottom, put the cursor there, use our abstract prompt to generate the abstract. And that is, I think, the last thing that we need to do for this patent application. And let's go back to the chat tab. So we've done everything it's suggested here. So I'm going to say, how are we doing now? And I'll go ahead and ask Claude, how are we doing? So it's now going to review the entire draft of the patent application, the invention disclosure of the drawings, and make sure that there's nothing that we've missed. So here we go. All right, so this is great. The application is in ex excellent shape. Here is the full status. These are all the things that we've done. Um, and it's got some things, for us to check, and I think that's okay. So overall, application is substantially complete and ready for attorney review. Um, Excellent. So I think that is everything I wanted to show for our drafting tools. We now have a complete patent application. And of course, you as the patent attorney need to review everything in detail to make sure that Claude has done a good description of everything. But I think it can save you a ton of time with your drafting tasks.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. That was hugely helpful. I know we're coming up on time, but we probably have time for one or two more questions.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of related to the previous one about the fact that it's submitting the latest version of the word with each iteration. Um, a couple folks have wanted to know, is Claude recognizing those differences and using it to learn to help it craft its next replies?
So we don't do any training on any of your data. That's really important for everyone. So no training on your data. But in terms of keeping like previous drafts anywhere for like tracking the evolution, we don't do that. I think if you give Claude too much information, it gets confused. Um, so yeah, we only keep and use the current draft of the Word document, and we don't do anything relating to changes that you've made. I can think about it, but I think it'd be hard to do well, I think, but something to think about.
And then we've got a question about asking it to double check for, reference labels and or, reference mistakes. And I think that would be where you'd want to segue over to the proofreading tools, right? Once you feel like your application's in a good spot, switch to the
Mhm.
proofreading tab and still use those Pattern Bots tools to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Claude actually does a very good job of not having mistakes, which is great. But Gen AI can sometimes do unexpected things. And the proofreading tool that we have is great because our proofreading tool, um, for nearly all of it, doesn't use any generative AI. It's using, rules that we've created. So you're going to get expected results and, not kind of, weird Gen AI kinds of things. I do want to mention one thing before we go. This might have come up in some of the questions, but a frequent question we get is how can you draft with my own personal style for drafting? And there's two ways that we can do that. One, we've already covered to some extent. We have our custom prompt section that you have here, so you can create prompts to mirror your style. And the other thing I want to mention that we don't have yet, but should be coming this coming month in August, is I mentioned that we have our own internal patent drafting skill to tell Claude how to better draft patents. Um, One thing we're going to do very soon is make our drafting skill publicly available and then allow you to modify the drafting skill to match your drafting preferences instead of mine. And then you can attach your drafting skill to our Gen AI tools, and then Claude's going to do an even better job in drafting the way that you personally like to draft. So that is something I'm really excited about, and we should see that in the coming months.
That is the perfect one to end on, Jeff, because that was actually a question we had gotten a few times. So, great. Well, well, I know we are at time. We covered a lot in that hour. So thank you, Jeff, for leading this demonstration. And thank you all so much for joining and for all the great questions. I know there were a few we didn't get to. Feel free to reach out to us afterwards at support@patentbots.com if you want to chat further. If you're not currently using our tools, you can set up a free trial and give this a try for yourself with the information Jeff has there on the screen. But again, thank you all so much for sharing your time with us. We will share the recording, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.
Great. Nice seeing you all. Thank you.